What's up, everybody? My name is Bohdon Sayre, and I'm a creative director at Flight School Studio. I'm going to be going over some look dev for one of our projects, Manifest 99, today. But before we do, we got some random news and goodies. Brandon Oldenburg and Taylor Williams are currently at the Toronto International Film Festival. Brandon was lucky enough to be able to curate a nice selection of VR experiences that they're showing there. And you can check out the website, bellovesmovies.com, to see those films. One of them is our newly completed VR title, Manifest 99. Another member of our crew, Pete Herzog, is at the US Open. We just finished this cool installation. There's an article on Adweek about it. American Express built a game. So essentially, this is like a octagon of air tennis. Yeah, I can scoot over.
Yes, go.
So essentially, players can line up and go into a booth and swing their hands in the air, and we're using Kinect to have them play some air tennis. It's really cool. Great. We're adjusting camera stuff. Also, Kyle has graciously decorated our new environment. And lastly, but not least, Manifest 99 is coming out very soon. It's coming out next Tuesday, I believe, the 12th. So please be sure to check it out. It's coming out on pretty much every platform, PSVR, Oculus, 5-port, Steam VR, and we're super excited for you guys to check it out. The Steam store page is live, so you can go there and add it to your wish list. And please try it. Let us know what you think. It's going to be cool. Cool. So I have a couple of things. I'm going to start with some concept art. What do we got? So just wanted to start with some of the original art that Adam had done on this project. We're talking about Manifest 99. And kind of when we started, we knew like we want to have this stylized look. Just some really cool concept art of the character we call Crowboy. One of the key pieces that we had as well showed some like lighting treatments. Where's that one? This one's really cool. So this shows off some really cool treatments of how we wanted to handle fog lighting and stuff like that. There's a few more I think I want to show before we dive into this. This one's really nice, and again, it's just like accentuating. We wanted hard shadows. We wanted really gestural shapes. We pretty much wanted toon shading. Like we weren't calling it toon shading, but we knew we wanted to do something that was like less gradual in terms of how value changes over the form of an object. What else we got? Yeah, those are some of the really good ones. Oh, this one's really early on. I like this one a lot. This one had some cool effect of just how we were going to treat some of our environment work. This is the bear environment from kind of this World War I era, I think it is. Lots of noise, grain stuff. So kind of the first thing we did, I'm going to dive right into the engine. Hopefully I can get through everything we got. So first thing we did was kind of mess with how we were going to accomplish toon shading, so to speak, in Unreal. And for time's sake, we kind of just dove into the built-in shaders and then just started messing around. You do need to like edit the source of the engine, so we quickly kind of started branching UE and just making our own version of what we're going to do. We don't normally have to branch UE for a lot of our projects. We tend to just use the stock engine, but this was like a perfect opportunity for that. So the first thing you'll notice about this is that like this build of the engine by default has objects being lit with like a very two-tone type lighting. So you don't get the normal gradual lighting that you would see on a sphere when you're hitting it with light. And this is literally just kind of like we globally applied this to the engine. So in the future, we probably would have used like I think you do materials and plugins now, like add new types of materials and plugins, we probably do that so we can optionally have some materials that are tuned and some that aren't. But for this, we're just like, yeah, let's do it. All materials tuned. Which worked out fine. Like, we honestly never ran into a situation where we're like, oh, I wish we could like not use tune shading for this scene. Yeah, you can see like even as the light dims, it's still hitting it 100%. So essentially the way we did this, I literally only modified a couple of lines of shader code and how their deferred lighting works. And it really was just to try to mess with how the normal still light reacts to a sphere. So by default, when light hits an object, like this is a directional light, it's just coming in from wherever, up here. So when it hits it, it's literally just checking like, okay, what's the angle of the light and what's the angle of the normal of the surface? The normal of the surface is really just kind of like a line that points straight out. You could call it like perpendicular to the surface of an object. So in a sphere, it's real simple. The normals are all just like sticking straight out of the sphere. And so what we essentially did is just change it so that all of the normals that are kind of close, so like at the front of the sphere and then moving around to the side of it, we changed them so that they're all just essentially facing the directional light. So everything on the front half of the sphere is getting hit as if it was, you know, the frontmost normal, the normal that's facing it the most. And it did that with just like a smooth step that essentially ramped it. That allowed us too to like control the fall off of that. Like, we didn't go to like infinitely tuned shaded. We actually created like, there's a small number. It goes from like 0 to like 0.008, I think. Nice. So that allowed us to keep it a little smooth, because we noticed like if we made this like a fully tight line, then like you could get some artifacting when you're like really far away, like some aliasing, so to speak. Any aliasing was like a big deal in this, especially in VR, because it can be expensive and can not look great. So we're like, okay, let's try not to use like perfectly sharp edges everywhere we can, but like pretty much as close as they need to be to accomplish the look we're going for. So then we started messing with some other concepts. This is an early test map we made at the beginning of the project. It just kept around. So this was like, okay, how does this tune shading apply to just like random objects like rocks and things like that? And in this rocks example, I'm pretty sure we just used a normal map to fudge up the edges. Yeah, I just used like a super subtle normal map that essentially kind of looks like a rock texture. I don't know if you can see that very well or not. But that essentially applies like a bumpy surface to the object, and then when the light catches it, that allows us to put like a little bit of like a rough edge on each of these edges. Which again, like going back to I should keep some of this open. Going back to some of this content, like we wanted a little bit of this, like it's not a perfect line, it's got that brush stroke, that texture type stuff in it around the edges. Yeah, so like, okay, cool, stock objects, messing with cylinders and stuff like that. And then I actually dialed it in like how spec was going to work. We didn't take advantage of spec a lot in the end. We ended up like turning off, and a spec is essentially just like, you know, how shinier materials like metal or something respond to light. It's pretty hard to see on this object, but there's a band of lighter color here that appears based on the reflection to this spotlight. So the spotlight's coming in, it's hitting this cylinder, and it leaves a little bit of like a light band in the center of the object where it would be hit. I think you can see it on the sphere more. Yeah, so you can see there's like a little bit of a light spot here. And that's essentially, you know, basically reflecting kind of like a blurred version of the sun or the point light or whatever that may be. Anyway, that's specular. So we wanted to treat that a little bit too. So as you can see, we tighten that up so that it's just like one color, flat, falls off with a little bit of a texture, again following the same smooth, changed normals, so to speak. So we were just messing around with like, cool, how does everything respond to different types of light, points, lights, and things like that, just to make sure that like it would handle most of the situations we needed. All types of shapes and stuff. Yeah, there's not a lot of shape types in here. So then we're like, okay, cool. We should totally try out the fog cone type stuff. Where's that deer image that we'd referenced here? And what we loved about this was that like the fog cone color didn't really need to pay respects to like the light color. So this could be like kind of a cooler light, but it's casting like a warm fog cone, and there's just that nice hard line that should be like perfectly hard between the fog cone and the environment. So we created like, you know, we used the built-in cone first. We're just like, cool, there's a cone. Let's put a cone on the spotlight. Let's have it match the angle of the spotlight. It's literally just kind of parented to this, like the light is parented to this cone. This is the cone geo, right? It's pretty big right now. And then a real simple material on this, like couldn't be simpler, I think. Where's that guy? So we're just like, cool, for all the fog cones, we just have a color and then a nice depth fade. This depth fade node is great. It essentially just says like, okay, where is the cone in terms of depth in the scene? So if I imagine, you know, I'm tracing like the front edge of this cone, the front face of this cone. If I'm looking through this front face, I'll use this like vertex as an example. And it'd be like, okay, cool, that front vert is like, you know, pretty far away from my camera, and then the object behind it is a little bit farther, and then the object behind that is a little bit farther. You may have seen like this type of look. This unshaded look actually shows it pretty well. It kind of just looks like a depth map. But essentially it compares those two values, the value of like the object, the fog cone in this case, and the depth of the objects behind it, and then it can fade out the cone based on how close they are. So we're essentially saying that like over a distance of like 200, this is centimeters in this case, over 200 centimeters, fade it out, and then if anything's past 200 centimeters behind this fog cone, it'll be fully opaque, so to speak, fog cone. And the fog cone is also additive, or it's translucent additive, so that means that it literally is just like whatever color it is just getting added on top of the background. Yeah. So we found it was like super easy to make this look good when we were just like, yeah, additive light, any color really to match the spotlight color, whatever we wanted to do. So the fog cone was covered. We're like, okay, cool, but how do we get the spotlight to work? Because like a default spotlight, if I bring one in here, still doesn't really match our style. It's got that like realistic fall off and all those goodies and stuff. But we like did not have to do much to just tweak some settings to get it to abide by the style we were going for. So first things first, we like always made sure our inner cone angle and our outer matched. That's kind of like the softness of the fall off of like the cone angle itself. So when these start to match, then you start to get that nice sharp line, which is great. And again, we were like, let's not make them perfectly matched. Let's make them like just under, so that we don't run into like aliasing in tight situations. So I think on average it was like, you know, if you're 35 inner, you'd do like a 35.5 outer, something like that. That way you'd get like a little bit of this fall off. But for the most part, like it looks sharp, looks great. And then for the distance fall off, we ended up like, depending on the use case, we would either allow it to fall off into distance, which is decay, or we would just be like, no, this light should just be like, wherever it is, it should be just full blast. And that's super easy to do just by turning off the inverse square fall off. You just kill that, and your light will get like insanely bright because you're not taking this like 10,000, 100,000 intensity, and you're having it like not fall off nearly as much. And honestly, we would crank this to 0. Our light fall off exponent, we would just drop this to 0. Once that happens, like this light intensity really doesn't need to, like, it's a totally different range. So this is like kind of becomes like 0 to 1 a little bit. So at a value of like 4 or so, we're seeing like we just got solid light color being applied to these objects. And you can see like this is the maximum distance of this spotlight. It's like totally gone instantly once it drops off. So there's like 0 fall off. You can do it like, you know, 0.1, 0.5. And we considered, I think on this spotlight, or on this point light, I was like, oh, that's actually kind of neat. You could do like, what was the fall off on this? 0.2. Yeah, you could have it like, have a little bit of dip into darkness just before it disappears, which is kind of nice. but like you honestly didn't really notice it when it came down to the final thing, right? We're like, okay, cool, yeah, we can stick to that. Whatever lights we place, those are easy settings to change. They don't really affect they don't have a lot of technical impact, right? Yeah, cool. And again, like these sliders have like a designated range. They're like, yeah, go from 2 to 16. And we're like, nope, let's drop this to 0.001. You can't do it to 0, obviously, but yeah. And then Slug says, use level lighting, tweaking for every interactive project. Yeah. So like, again, with something like this, when there's a lot of visual style defined before the project, we will do like a bunch of R&D on like, oh yeah, how are we globally going to approach this across the board? I don't think, like, you wouldn't need to do this type of specific lighting R&D for visual styles that are potentially more figured out, where you're more like, okay, yeah, I know how I can accomplish that already with like the built-in tools. And most of these, it wasn't like we're spending a lot of time trying to just like figure stuff out. It's literally just like, let's put all of our ideas together in one scene just to test to make sure that that will actually work. So let's try the sharp lighting, let's try the fall off, and let's try the tune shading stuff and see if that actually gets close to what we were going for, right? There's one other one that we use. We only use this in a few scenes, but like if you're using a directional light, I think we have one in here. It's probably turned off. It's on, but there's no shadows. Yeah. We loved the shadow filter sharpen because we just tighten these guys up. So essentially, like dynamic directional lights like this are casting what you'd call it like a depth map shadow, so to speak, and they blur it after they cast it so that it gets rid of like some of the artifacts, because it can be like a little low resolution depending on the objects and the shapes of the surfaces and all that stuff. But that blurry edge, you can control like how much they effectively sharpen that as like a post-process of the shadow maps themselves. So you can just dial that up, and we're like, perfect, awesome, sharp shadows, what we needed. And that won't be like perfect to the contour of something, but we didn't really care. Like it could be gestural. So like again, the resolution of the shadow map will determine like how accurate this is. I think I can botch the scale to try to show that, maybe not. But we're like, it's cool if it's kind of like gestural, if these lines are sharp but aren't like perfectly representative of the shadows that, or the objects that they're casting shadows for. That was totally fine. That was within the style. Yeah, what else was there on spotlights? We'll leave that directional. Yeah, again, we ran into stuff where like, because we're doing this no fall off spotlight, the attenuation radius, or the radius of like how far this spotlight can go before it's just totally killed, like had a big impact. So I'll get into it later, but like these spotlights were often on a train, right? And if there's, train geo, we potentially weren't necessarily casting shadows with all of these guys. So they'd sometimes just like stick through the sides of the train car, and you'd notice it like crazy because there's lighting the environment around it like at full luminance, right? So we had to try to mess with a lot of like lighting channel setups type stuff, which I might be able to get into. We'll see. I should cut forward. Cool. Yeah, I don't think we changed many of these other settings, honestly. Yeah, let's jump into the actual projects. This was just like a test project that we had. So this is a scene from the actual shipped product. This is kind of along the Doe's environment. She's kind of like a photographer and lover of great art, and she travels through this kind of underwater environment. It's really cool. But you can see how we kind of like applied some of that stuff we just talked about. We've got these like really sharp fog cones. We ended up tweaking these fog cones. I think they're implemented a little differently than what we had before. Part of that is literally just like fall off by distance, so we could handle performance type stuff. And then also we were just kind of like, we got to coalesce this whole system into like one blueprint so that we can just manage a spotlight on its own, like a single color to control everything. because we knew we were going to have tunnels that the train would go through. We wanted the lights to flicker, so we're like, cool, we just want to have one color value on this spotlight, or on this hanging light that we can animate, and that'll control like the color and warmth of everything. But you can see how this like works pretty well even on like square objects. So the one thing that we didn't modify, we just didn't have the time to really dive into it, I think, but honestly it kind of worked out. We didn't mess with how light mask or light baking or any of that stuff works. And we knew, this being VR, we were going to have to bake like most of our lights. You just can't afford full dynamic, changeable, movable lights for your entire scenes and also run it on VR because you're rendering the game twice, once per eye. It gets heavy. So we're like, okay, we're going to try to bake lighting on the trains. So we proposed a couple of problems. Originally we're like, well, do we need to, like, do the trains need to move? Can we slide the environments? And we quickly ran into the environments are a little too heavy to move. But then we discovered the really nice feature of being able to mark objects to be lit as static even though they're going to move. So there's a setting on objects that you can find. And in this case, like, the train is moving, the train's on a track, everything on the train needs to move. So baking it as if it's not moving, you kind of just have to tell the engine, like, look, I get it, like, the lighting that you're baking is not going to change when this train moves, but bake it anyway. And that was great. So all the lighting all the like subtle lighting and the gradients and stuff that you're seeing is all baked, just like with normal lights. And those lights, so to circle back around, those lights that we baked don't really have tune shading applied to them. So when we bake stuff that aren't the main spotlights or anything, they get a little bit of subtle gradients and stuff going on that you wouldn't normally get if it was just like a full tune environment. So you can see, like, even on this crate here, like, it's darker in the shadows because you get that subtle like occlusion gradient, and then it gets a little bit lighter near where there's like, I think there's a couple of lights in here. Yeah, this is like a baked light. We just scattered a couple of spotlights along the train to accomplish what we needed. And then the light that's casting through the windows we also baked. So you can see it's like not as sharp as we probably would have wanted it, but it's close enough, especially for like the light map resolution we had. And then what we did is we're like, okay, well, if we're gonna bake our directional lights that are coming through our windows, but then you go into a tunnel, how are we gonna hide the directional light? Otherwise it'd be like, why am I in a tunnel and there's still light casting inside of the train? Fortunately, we could handle that with post-processes. So like all this R&D kind of happened at different times throughout the project, but it's all pretty much tied together. So I don't think it's in this scene, but essentially on the character, or just like on the main gameplay prefab or blueprints, there's a post-process volume. And we can just use that to take the GI intensity up or down completely. So this is the baked lighting. You can see I'm dialing up and down. So essentially what we would do is when you're about to enter a tunnel, we go and just cut this out. And then we also apply like a post-process that in general just color corrected the whole scene to be much darker and flashes and all that stuff. And I realize I'm describing stuff you guys haven't seen, but you're just gonna have to get the game and try it out. But this was cool too because we could then tweak the color and the value and the intensity of this baked lighting however we needed to, and that was like hugely helpful. There is an environment light in here, a skylight I think, that's being applied, and that helped a lot to just localize the color of the trains per the environment that they're in. So again, we have like only a couple of, or not only a couple, but only a like limited set of colors for the objects and the props that we use to set dress the trains, just because we're like, cool, we can make a couple of seats and then just use them in all of our trains. But we had like very different color designs for each of the scenes. I think I'll show one of these images from one of the other scenes. Like one of them, for example, the color key was, you know, this very, very different from like the green doe or the orange, red, brown bear. These kind of represent our three scenes. We've got, this is the bear, this is the doe, this is the owl. So the baking of the light obviously can help you contribute that color. We did post processes in the end again that just like give us a nice color correct over the whole thing. And then those skylights per environments were really nice. And again, the skylight's nice because it's literally just like a global fill. They give us a little form.
You have a question, Bo?
Yeah, sure.
It may not be in the stream. This is from Joe Bloom.
Nice.
Do these unique issues and creative solutions fall on a team over time, or do they inform the aesthetic before full production?
In this case, like, we figured out most of this, well, I'll say most, a lot of the stuff before we had to distribute it. Honestly, our production team size wasn't very large in the first place. So, like, we essentially had one lighter, and she handled a lot of the troubleshooting of, like, cool, how am I going to, like, bake the lighting on the train, but also make sure that they can work and go in the tunnels and stuff like that. And I was working on the tune shading, look development stuff, that testing that I showed earlier, before anyone else was on the project. So we did do a lot of it in advance, just because we wanted that. We really, really wanted that before we went into asset production on any of these objects, crates and stuff like that. Open up like a crate. Some crate. Also, like the unknown advantage of us applying that tune shading effect to the entire engine, no holds barred, no options, no going back, was that, like, even when you preview stuff like a mesh without any material on it or anything like that, it'll show you how the form is going to potentially react to light. So we can see here, like, you know, we've got a little bit of this, like, subtle shadowing stuff that won't happen in our scene just because our directional light setup is different than how this is. But you can see that, like, the value of the top versus the side and stuff like that is not as different as it would be if we hadn't applied that.
You got another question, Bo?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
You talked about some of this, but were there different constraints on the lighting / post-processing for PC versus console versions of the game? And also, Jen says your keyboard is not loud enough.
I'm sorry. Like, I thought about bringing a mechanical keyboard. I tried to make this as close to my environment as I could. Yeah, I can type louder. It's fine. Yeah, for sure. PC console can be very differently. We developed this knowing in advance that we wanted to be on console. So we were like, great. Our simplistic asset style, like, we can keep our meshes low poly. We can keep our scenes pretty simple. But we still had to, like, kind of fight to get the performance we needed, especially when you're trying to hit 60 FPS on console. That was for sure a challenge. And in the end, like, there's only a couple of things that we ended up making different for the PC version. So again, like, when the game's running, you can check, like, cool, what platform am I on? And if it's on one or the other, you can do some different visual checks. The same thing applies for, like, PS4 versus PS4 Pro. You can, like, enable a couple of extra things, like a higher screen percentage or something, just to make it render a little bit nicer. Cool. What else? I have a couple of VFX things, but I want to make sure I cover all this stuff. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff in here too that we didn't do with lighting. That kind of relates to that question as well. Like, you know, there's a lot of things in this concept that you can accomplish just with, like, material tricks, right? And the crows being, like, one of our more prominent elements in this game, we're like, okay, we don't want to go nuts on how we're going to be lighting and shadowing and whatever handling these crows. So you can kind of tell, but, like, all of the crows just have, like, a built-in rim light capability. And that is literally just, like, material trick. So essentially, can I grab this guy? Great. I'll show the material itself just for fun, but it's cool. Right. I think it's crow body. Crow body fade. Yeah, some of the crows can appear, disappear. So essentially we do, like, a normal to light. So we'd figure out, like, okay, cool, where's, in our case, a light direction was just, like, this singular, like, it's not representing any actual light, we just called it light direction. But this is essentially, like, let's pretend there was a light on this guy and it was coming from a specific direction, or it had a specific direction being, like, a vector. You dot that normal to the surface normal, and then we use that to kind of create, like, a rim for each of these guys. This is just, like, some functionality for allowing the crows to, like, fill with white when you're about to teleport them, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so in practice, what you'd have on every crow was a couple of settings here, light direction you can see, and rim light. So the rim light we can pretty much just change to whatever color we want. Make it super bright if we want to, right? So these are just hard-coded to match the environment that they're designed to exist within. So we'd be like, yeah, cool, he's in a green environment, just keep it a little subtle. And then the light direction is literally just like X, Y, Z coordinates. So these values, like, we didn't really pay attention to normalizing them because we're going through this stuff so fast, but usually you'd want this to be normalized. So if Z is up and I make this 1, then it means the light is coming down from the top. So you can kind of see, like, cool, I'm hitting the crow with like a theoretical light. But again, this is not lighting at all. This is just like a Mike. How about now? Yeah, looks good. Great. I'm pretty sure I overheated my machine, and hopefully it does not overheat again. But let's try this. Source build.
I don't hear you.
Give it a second. Can you hear me now? Great. 60 FPS all day. Yeah, let me just load up some PUBG while we wait for this project to open. Why did that check that? Okay, yeah. Engine products, fine. Yeah, so what else we got? I have not been reading the stream. I need to read you guys. Doom 64. Yeah, we should definitely play Doom 64 on a stream. That's a great idea. UE's been great. How's UE been for you guys? UE's been great. This was actually my first UE project, but it was not difficult to get into. The post-production, the tail of it, shipping on different platforms and consoles, like, honestly, like 80-90% of it was just handled, and I was like, okay, cool, I just need to figure out how to deal with all the weird specific use cases of what we're doing on this project. But yeah, the support is legit. Like, we use UDN for all of our issues and stuff, and there's also a couple of people from different companies that helped us in like a pinch at the end of the production, so it's a good community. Great. So yeah, I got a little bit more time. I'll show like a few like VFX stuff, VFX things. Where's that? Good. Great. Right, so one of the pieces, did I show this concept art? One of the pieces of concept art had this really sweet ninja smoky eye effect. That I'm pretty sure Adam did. If it wasn't Adam, I'm sorry, Jake. If it was Jake, great job. If it was Adam, great job. Where is that? Big comments, please. This one has it. This was a later one after it had already been established, but this bear's got these like really cool smoky eyes. So we wanted to encounter the characters in our train. We had a few of them. We're like, it's got to be really cool and creepy and spooky when you come up on them. Oh yeah, this was the original. Yeah, this was super cool. So we're like, this is dope. You should totally try to hit this. This visual style, right? So the smoky eyes was like one of those effects, and then the starry like backside shader was another effect that we also tried to hit, and we got pretty close. There's some we got some cool parallax effect stuff that went on, which is great in VR because you can actually kind of feel it. Like parallax stuff often, you see it a lot in like ice shaders and stuff. Like I'm pretty sure the Call of Duty guys like invented parallax ice shaders or something. I don't know what I'm talking about. But we're like, we can use the same technique, but it'll be even cooler because it's VR and you'll get to like actually see like it'll look like a star field like within each of the characters and stuff like that. And of course the characters need to fade up and down, so we had to do the whole thing with opacity masks. We did not use semi-transparency for this stuff. We just did like straight clipped masked materials because it was more efficient, more performance, stuff like that. So to cover both of those fairly quickly, AI is definitely AI is definitely a threat to humanity, but let's not talk about that right now. Where's that? Oh, I have this guy somewhere. Yeah, good. I'm your Elon. Well, Elon's a lot richer, okay? Don't trust me. Starry material tests. I think that's the one I want. Yeah, cool. So this was our test of like, cool, how are we gonna accomplish this kind of like material trick? So this was like the first sphere we made, and you can kind of see like it's got this parallax thing going on. I'm gonna try to do this nice and slow so you can see it. And this is just a flat surface. It's just like one sphere basically. And what you're looking at is like 3 layers of stars. Oh cool, I can do it on lit. That's even better. So I just used the same texture and then just kind of like repeated it for each of the 3 layers, but they're all offset to like different depths. And then essentially what we found is like this works great on like front-facing surfaces, but like you quickly run into like stretching issues and stuff near the edges or normals that are facing farther away from the camera. So we did this like black Fresnel, you could call it, just to like limit where this is being applied. So essentially you'd get this shader like on the front faces of all these characters, and it give you that nice like creepy eerie fill. We didn't go so hard with this. This purple light was like super hard. We didn't go that hard in the final, but something more like that. And there's like the ability to dial in the local color of this guy. You can kind of tell, but like his local textures, like his nose is a little bit brighter and browner, and his head's a little bit darker than his jacket. That local color, we wanted like a little bit of it, but we mostly just wanted like solid color. Crowboy to a character from Friends. Oh, I can't remember his name. No, it's definitely not Joey. Crowboy is not Joey. That's a ridiculous notion. Anyway, so that was like the base of this guy, and I'm gonna show that. It's terrible questions. Am I bear story? Where's that guy? Phoebe. See, I like that better. Crowboy is more like Phoebe. Yeah, agreed. This is our beautiful starry shader. I think I actually ended up, I took out the 3rd layer later in the production just because like needed to save a little bit of performance. So there was originally like 3 layers of stars here, but I ended up like nuking this last layer, so this isn't hooked up. But essentially this gives you like tangent space vectors. It's kind of like, here, how can I show this? Yeah, sure. Start previewing. So this is kind of like, no matter how you're looking at the object, you'll get like X and Y coordinates that you can use to map a texture, again, UV space, X and Y, to an object. So like even if the mesh, let's do Crowboy, because everybody loves talking about Crowboy. SK Crowboy. Yeah, so like regardless of how the mesh is facing you, you will always get, you know, pretty much, like you could call it perpendicular screen, but it's not. It's just how this works. X coordinates for your surface and Y coordinates that are kind of like respecting you. So if I go to just like, let me see if I can use like one of these textures. Start previewing. God, it's so dark. Let's put something ridiculous on there. Bigger scale, bigger scale. Oh, Jamil's here. What's up, Jamil? How you doing, Jamil? There's got to be something in here, like a tile or something. So many textures. Oh, there you go. Grass. That's pretty good. Yeah. So this is just essentially kind of keeping the surface like nice and flat to you. And this is currently applying the offset. If I do this, if I add here, this is flat to the surface. So this is essentially like, there is no depth. It does not change based on how you're looking at it. It's just kind of like stuck to the surface, right? So once you start adding in this depth, so this is our parallax depth, and I think I can change this in real time while viewing the stars to see how the effect works. It's just kind of hard to see that. What's this texture? Star pattern, T, star pattern. Hopefully this isn't as dark for you guys. And this guy has starry shadow test. Cool. This is an instance. Great. So I can change the depth in here. This is our parallax depth. So if I flatten this out to 0, there's 0 depth. I also have a slide on there. You can see it's like animating over time. I don't think I exposed that. I can turn that off real quick just so we can see. Time. Scroll speed, scroll speed. Add 0. Great. Oh, I did. It's just a 2D vector or 3D vector. Yeah, so what was cool is like the depth was great, and you could see it like if you moved your head slightly too, like it would look really cool if you like moved your head slightly around it. But it was like hard to see if you were like standing perfectly still, even though you felt the depth. So I was like, let's have it slide. That way, like the layers will come at you like at different speeds, and it'll accentuate the depth, right? So this is totally flat to the surface. Like the sphere has no depth to it, right? And you can't really tell that there's multiple layers of stars. It's just one layer of stars. And then if I add like a little bit of depth, then you can start to see a little bit of separation between the two layers. And then if I add like a lot of depth, then you can see there's a distinct distance between like the front layer and the back layer. And again, like I was like, great, multiply by 5. Let's have 10 layers. Super depth star field. It's like not performance. Dead. Yeah, 2 is enough. 2 is great. I think our parallax ended up being at 2. So that's the stars. And then we ended up using like world space sphere masks for masking a lot of the effects. So yeah, mask the starry parallax stuff with a Fresnel. This just like allowed it to fall to black near the edges. This was cool, like just a little bit of a subtle tint of the stars as they approached the areas where the character could receive light. So in this case, his feet, the stars on his feet were like the brightest, and then as the stars approached kind of this sphere that you can see here that controls where the light can be cast, it changed the color of the stars. In this case, I don't think the color is very different, but we had a case where like the stars would straight up just become purple as they were approaching the top of the character, which gave like a nice gradient of all of the stars across the character. But yeah, so this rim light effect we pretty much did similar to how the crows rim light handled, except we did it with like a couple of point objects. Yeah, these aren't. Yeah, so this guy is saying like, cool. This spotlight determines where the rim light object is coming from, and you have to actually like refresh it when you do this. So that'd be like, cool. Now the rim can only come from this side, which is also outside of the range of the sphere. Yeah, and then the sphere controlled, went too far out of the range of the sphere, how much of the character could receive light. So if I just made this like a small sphere over here, oops, refresh this guy, then the light can literally only occur like within that sphere. And it's a nice fall off between like center of the sphere gets hit, rest of the sphere no. So that helped, like we didn't need to cast shadows on this guy because we could just be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna just like limit the light to just the top of the character, and then I wouldn't have to worry about like his legs receiving top light or anything like that. Oh, Kendra's on. What's after that? What's your Twitter handle? Bohdon. It's my first name. Yeah. Totally. Russell Flincher. Who's that? Welcome to the chat. Yeah, so this was cool. We used this like globally placed without the train. At one point we were like, man, I wish I had just like parented it to the characters so that like as their characters are potentially moving through the train, it wouldn't have to like deal with them going in and out of color mask spheres. But this worked out pretty well. So yeah, there was like one globally positioned object to mask the color, and then one for the rim light direction. So what was interesting is if you actually separated the rim light direction from the light, I don't think we did that in a lot of cases. We just ended up using like the light as the rim light source as well. But like if you put just like any object in here, target point, it's the only one that's seeing great. Target point. Then this is saying like, cool, the rim light will only exist like coming from that direction. So you could have a top-down light that hits this guy, but then the rim is limited to like a nice line around the edge of the character, which is dope. So that allowed us to get even closer to like some of that really cool concept stuff. There's a lot of subtlety in here that I wish we had had more time to just like keep pushing forward and try to get to, but you know, we made broad strokes first, and then we kind of just like, oh crap, we have to finish the project in 3 months. Let's get moving. Kendra. Good one, Kendra. Yeah, and then we just like, I had a mask on there to limit it to like in this case, the bear and his gun and his backpack and everything are all one mesh, so I just limit it based on a mask. Yeah, so this is like the mask based on the sphere and the rim light edge and stuff like that. And then this is a really cool effect that you just have to play the game to see, where the characters, like, when you stare at them, they fill up with white light that emanates from both of their eyes and then fills their body with white, and it's super cool. Also, like, I wish we had gotten to push even farther, because Adam did some sweet concept art for how that was theoretically going to look when finished, but we got close. Okay, yeah, so let's do one last thing, I think. We only have like a few minutes, right? NBD. Let's do these smoky eye things. These are pretty cool, right? Went through a lot of iterations on this thing. Where is that? Don't crash on me. Cool. Yeah, so I think I can just pull these in a new scene. I can do it. What was the time frame for the game? So we started the game in January. Like, we started the game faster than almost any production that I've ever seen. We were kind of like, okay, we need an idea. Also, we're forming a company and we need an idea. Let's do something. So we came up with an idea in like 2 weeks, and then we were essentially starting it the next month. So In December, we came up with the idea. January, we started the production. We pretty much finished the bulk of production, I think, like June or so. End of May, maybe. Somewhere around there. May or June.
I think
And then,
April.
what is it, April, really?
Yes.
Wow. And then we just had a long tail of console bug fixing, publishing, optimization stuff, and just like trying to push it on all the platforms. Yeah, so it was pretty fast. It was like literally like a 3 or 4 month core production with a good amount of tail on the end. And we knew we had never done console development before, so we're like, we think it's going to take a couple of months, but we have no idea. And that was that was true. Okay, where's that thing? I smoke.
Go keep your head in the stream.
Sorry.
In the frame.
You don't need to see you need to see my face. See ya. Wouldn't want to be ya. Okay. So I don't think I have the early versions of this, of the smoke trail thing. Ghost Eyes Beam, Ghost Eyes Trail, I do. But those are kind of, I don't know if they're working. I have an old test map for this. Ghost Eye Trail tests. Yeah, this just has the final one in it. Anyway, I was like, yeah, of course, particle systems do like a sweet ribbon thing or something, because that way, like, as the object moves around, you know, your particle trail would like do really cool stuff. That's been done in a lot of games, and that's how a lot of people have accomplished similar effects. I was like, let's do that. We got close, and then I started like applying it to our scene, and started running into a lot of issues related to potentially like the moving train car itself, because the train car literally is moving through physical space at like 600 units per second or something like that. 6,000 units per second. It's booking it. Train's booking it. So it would kind of drag and stutter, and there's some other stuff where like maybe we can add some velocity to the trail to make sure that it works in local space, but it's just too hard to like get local space stuff to work. And it was also just like too sensitive to like any movement. So John Durbin and Andrew Stovesand were the two animators on this. They provided us some like really cool like animations for the bear, where the bear would like look away from you and like conceal his eyes, and we wanted the trail to like follow that. But with just like a pure physics particle trail that was like doing it correctly, it would often just like go through the head, because the particles would just kind of like go straight up. Yeah, for Dallas, we totally will talk. Yeah, just hit me up. So I was like, okay, we need to do this like more controlled. So I switched to, I think it's spline mesh. Yeah, spline mesh. So this is essentially, how do I do this? Let me nuke this, eye smoke. Nope. That's not world grid material. Oh, smoke material, there we go. Literally anything.
Bill, I don't think you can see this comment, but it's from Chris Collins. He says, this is one of my favorite effects in the game for sure.
Sick.
Say hi.
Yeah. What's up, Chris? Okay, yeah, so this is the mesh. So I just straight up modeled like a flat strip. It's not bent like this. Where's the smoke plane? It's the stupidest model you can imagine. So this is it. Yep. It's just a polyplane. And it's got a ton of subdivisions. So I could bend it and do what I need to do and put a vertex shader on it, because that's, spoiler alert, how I did this. So I was like, great, plane. And then in the eye smoke guy, I was like, cool, I'm gonna make a spline mesh that'll allow me to inherently bias this effect for the use in like eyes. So if this was your eye and the character's facing that way, whatever, then the smoke would like come first forward out of the eye and then go up. So it wouldn't protrude through like eyebrows, and it wouldn't run into like collisions in the rest of the head and stuff like that. And then all I did with the rest of the logic of this, yeah, totally. So all I did with the rest of the logic with this is just basically do like a smooth follow. Like it's not even like a physics sim. It's not IK. It's nothing fancy. It's literally just kind of like update the target location of this of the other spline mesh point, like smoothly over time. Boom, done. And this guy operates, I think, in local. Yeah, it had absolute rotation, but it operated in local space, so it could just be like simply updated. So it's just like a nice, super smooth follow for that second point. So that would give you like what you needed related to just like the. Actually, yeah, I can turn it off on here and then show that first. Let me do. Destroying all the things. Let me apply this. Apply this. I smoke. Same one. Well, anyway, I can't show it without material, but so that would just give you like a nice, simple like base layer for how the mesh is gonna move. So it's just like cool. I've got like a simple mesh that just like stays perfectly rigid, stuff like that. And then I was like, great, I can handle the rest of the stuff in the material. So the material for the eye smoke, pretty simple, could be worse, is essentially just applying basically delta vectors based on how far along you are on specific gradients that we control. So it's just kind of like, yeah, I've got a lot of settings here I can dial up to probably show this better, so I don't have to explain it all verbally. Thickness divergence. Lateral speed, rise, and fade and hardness, wave lateral magnitude, 0. Cool, cool. So the magnitude was literally just like, cool, for this plane, how far sideways. Actually, let me hook it up to the real mesh so we can see that. Smoke, eye, what was it called? Plane? Yeah. So magnitude is just like, great, how far laterally should we apply basically a moving noise texture? So like, I think I didn't even change this out from like a built-in noise. Yeah, this is expensive, but whatever, we shipped. This is just a simplex noise. It's just sliding along the object, so to speak, and then it's just applying like lateral movement to these guys. Yeah, thanks. I'm fairly certain I'm OCD, but I don't know it, or maybe I do know it. I'm not sure, but organization is good for sure. So this is the magnitude. Like, cool. How far laterally should we go? And I give that like a 0 to 10 range, but like, you know, depending on what you want to do. So that was like the base of it. And what I'd learned from messing with some of the like size equations for how we were doing the particle stuff is that it looks super cool if you can apply a little bit of like divergence between, essentially in this case, the left row of vertices and the right row of vertices. So if you consider the fact that like I only have control over moving each of the verts on this plane, I wanted to have the left side like move farther or shorter or whatever in relation to the right side. So the divergence, I set this to 0 to 0.5 range, so that's I should probably respect that. Yeah, so if I crank the divergence up, it gets pretty crazy. But that's essentially saying like, cool, the right side is just going to do like whatever it wants, and the left side is going to do whatever it wants, and then that'll create like really cool looking shapes when they like overlap like this. Does that make sense? Also, the simplex noise was clutch. Like, this was the one type of noise that I found like gave nice, round, perfectly smooth shapes with like sharp bumps in them, which like looked perfect to match a lot of the art that had come through. So I was like, this is dope. Anyway, I think I kept this pretty low because it looks cool when it's just like pretty subtle. Like if I do like, just to show, yeah, you get like a little bit of like size divergence in this thing when you're doing that. I think this is a 0.08 when I first had it. Anyway, that's that. So the vertex shader on top of the spline mesh moving around, and you get that nice thing. I don't know if this plays. Let's try simulating. No. It's probably airing out. I don't have everything set up here. But Bear Boy should have some animation on. Oh yeah, this is the actual prefab. Yeah. He's not gonna move until you play him. Yeah. Just have to play the game. Cool. Yeah, that's probably a lot for now. There's a couple of other really cool VFX I want to go over at some point. The warping VFX. I'm going to just show one of them for now just to incite that. Where's the ring? There's the ring shader. So, oh yeah, the one thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned on this. So, like the toon shading and all that stuff, there was one like shading technique that I just kept returning to, just because it was a technique that made sense for the visual style of the project, and that the philosophy of it is essentially that like I didn't want a lot of variations in values. I wanted like just a couple of values, like it's either black or white, right? That's toon shading. It's either like on or off. So for like VFX and stuff, you want like hard edges. You don't want like really nice billowy like value changing clouds and stuff like that. So smooth step is like just this thing, and you can do this with multiplication or whatever, but essentially it's like a levels, right? Where you're just taking something that's potentially, can't see my mouse, it's potentially 0 to 1, and you're giving it like a low and a high, and it'll come out as this like low to high ramp. So that'll essentially say like, instead of having a nice gradient, like say this is black to white, you'll just end up with fully black and fully white up here. So we did that effect to like a lot of different textures and things like that. In this case, this is one of them. This is the particle. Oh, cool, I can show the particle. So that allowed us to get like some sharp effects on how this is going to work. Yeah, actually I can just open up that particle to show this. P ring, grow, warp, ring, shrink, grow. Nope. P ring. Where is this guy? Oops. Charge dust. Right, that was the charge dust. Gotta love that anime stretch stuff. Glint lines. Ring shrink. Is that the one? Yeah, cool. Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna slow this down a little bit. So this was just like, there's one ring material here, too slow I guess, that just kind of like fades on and off, and the hard edge of the noise, how the noise is kind of like being remapped to be pretty solid white band, and then eventually kind of just like, yeah, snipping tool for sure. Snipping tool for the win. Love it, guys. Good job. The fall off of how like you've got the noise, but you pretty much just want to like erode it quickly. You don't want there to be like huge gradients of like large values. You just want it to be white or dip off into black transparency in this case. Anyway, smooth step for all of that junk. So anytime I had something that was like, oh, it's kind of smooth, I'm just gonna like tighten it up and then just make things like this just happen fast. This one was cool because I ended up sliding the noise too to accentuate the inward motion. Yeah, who doesn't love snipping tool? The unfortunate part is like Windows 8, they don't have this like delay, this freaking delay. So you cannot snip like temporary pop-ups and stuff like that. Anyway, bumps me out. What are you gonna do?
Cry.
Windows 10. Yeah, it's free, built in. Couldn't be better. Anyway, that's a look at a lot of the visual dev stuff. Most of the early dev, at least. We obviously did like a ton of like spot fixes and random like, oh my gosh, we just gotta like get something in there for something because we gotta ship halfway through the project. But I think we spent like a decent amount of time. I'm satisfied with the amount of time we had up front just to be able to be like, cool, how can we accomplish this concept art? And again, like, it's hugely important to have this type of like concept art going into the project, like it is immensely helpful because I can just be like, yeah, let's just start breaking it down, talking about like how things are gonna feel in the game. This is one of the earliest ones, I think, and we'll be posting more of these goodies as time goes on. I'm sure. So you should definitely check out the game when it comes out next Tuesday. And if you haven't yet, you should subscribe to Flight School's Twitch and Twitter and all of the T's that you can think of. It's going to be fun.
Don't forget about Steam. You can add
Don't
it to
forget about
your
Steam,
wish
add it to your wish list. And there's a community on Steam, which is great. Like you can add notes and have a dialogue with us, and we'll respond to you and stuff like that. Great, yeah. Glad you liked it, Russell. We will for sure be doing this again. I don't know when the next one is, but we will post as soon as we know.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, says Sarah. And if you guys have any questions, again, just like we're totally open. Just send them to us one way or another, and we'll reach back out. What's up, Tom? Thanks for coming. See you later.